About the state of Horn of Africa in terms of refugees, as he's newly appointed as the ambassador for not just the Somalia region but the whole of the Horn of Africa. First of all, congratulations and welcome once again to Bottomline Africa.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, so the increase of the scope of your work, what does this mean to you and to the UNHCR?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me in your studios. I want to begin by thanking the High Commissioner for the honor bestowed on me and to this region and to Kenya as his special envoy for the Horn of Africa refugee situation. Now, as you know, that the Horn of Africa has been the theater of war for a considerable period of time, and this has led to massive displacement of the populations from those countries. And until recently, I was dealing, mainly my own focus was to how to find a solution for the Somali refugee situation, which, as you know, is one of the world's most protracted refugee case. We're talking about 27, 28 years of Somalis still in exile. And the High Commissioner has found it fit to expand my role now to include the Horn of Africa, which includes the countries of Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti. And as you know that recently the considerable steps were taken in some parts of the Horn of Africa, in particular the peace agreement between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Now this provides a new opportunity for the people of concern, particularly the displaced population who have sought for exile outside, to see the possibilities of having dignified return to those populations, but also to take care of their needs and aspirations in the countries of exile. So my role actually will be coordinating with the governments in the region on how to provide best protection and asylum space for those people who have sought refuge, but also working with the countries of origin to create conditions inside the countries of origin so that the refugees one day will find the possibility of returning home. As you know, nobody chooses to become a refugee. They are all compelling circumstances that force them out of their countries. And as a son of this region, I'm very privileged to take this role on behalf of the High Commissioner.
Well, that's very important. Once again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Kindly inform us about what the emerging issues are that affect refugees in the Horn of Africa region.
Well, first of all, the emerging issues, as you have already shown in your clip, you know, in the Southern Sudan, the peace process that has been secured by the parties needs to be implemented. This means that the South Sudanese population need to feel the benefits of this agreement. The same case, as you know, that has been substantial progress made and you know, a groundbreaking, so to speak, agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia, who have been in conflict for 20 years. Now the net effect, the agreements are made for populations to prosper. The net effect of that agreement means that the populations return, live in secure environment, progress and grow. And that also calls for the political leaders in the region, you know, to follow up these agreements with the concrete plans to help the population. So we as UNHCR and the UN agencies and partners of these countries will want to partner with these governments in the region, in particular with Eritrea and Ethiopia, with a view to giving meaning to the agreement, because these people who left those countries never left because they wanted to live. They were compelling circumstances of war and pain. Now they want to go back, but going back, it means we must all work towards the condition of return in the countries of origin. So I think that a lot of work needs to be done. We need to partner with these governments so that we give hope to the displaced population. As you know, in the context of Somalia, for instance, now we have assisted the Somali refugees in this region, in particular in Kenya, who wanted to return. Now, in the camps of Kenya, half the population have gone back already. And we're just remaining with less than half of the population that came. So in Kenya, we're talking about nearly 200,000 Somalis remaining. Those also require solutions, be they solutions inside Kenya or be they solutions for them to return. The same case for Eritreans who are in Kenya, who are in Ethiopia, who are in the rest of Africa, who fled Eritrea as a result of the war and the problems there. And now that we have peace in Eritrea, we have peace in Ethiopia, now that the countries have agreed, there is greater need to help that population to give them protection space in the countries that have given them exile, but also to assist them where the need arises and where this voluntary nature of return, to assist them to return back to conditions that are better.
Okay.
Now we need to work on those conditions. That means investment, that means resource mobilization for those countries, that means creation of jobs and hope for the youth, because the great majority of the affected population, as you will know, are women, children, and the youth.
Okay. Well, even as we talk about, cooperation with the host countries and the countries of origin as well, the aspect of poverty is it's intertwined with the Horn of Africa region, and as you well know that poverty might also play a hand in the refugee crisis, because once there is war, it boils down to the poverty levels increasing and also displacement of families in various countries, not just in the Horn of Africa. How is this a main mandate for the UNHCR? Because it's the root of the matter. Peace is one aspect, but how do we increase the economic status of these individuals?
No, thank you very much. First of all, it is the war that creates poverty. One of the biggest tools of poverty, as we know, is the instability in the area. People cannot grow, they cannot do their daily work, they cannot go to their farms, they cannot go to trade. So in the absence of war, there is hope that people can be able to use their skills and develop their countries. And secondly, we now have a global tool called the Global Compact for Refugee, which requires the international community to show solidarity with the countries hosting refugees. Now, countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Uganda in this region, which has over the years hosted large number of refugees, require to be supported by the international community. They require to share the burden brought about by hosting large population of refugees for a long period of time. So that tool, the Global Compact, expects the international community to act. And we hope that the international community will act fairly fast and swiftly to help the countries cope up with this pressure, and therefore allow the refugees to have safety net in the countries that have hosted them, but also help the host communities, because as you know that these refugees are hosted within communities.
Yes.
And if we not support equally the host communities, then we have to, we bring about poverty plus, refugee plus the host community combined. So I think that there's an obligation on all of us, global community, to help these countries, but also there's an obligation on the leaders of these countries to work for peace. As you know, that peace is the basis of stability. In the absence of peace, as you have shown in this clip, communities cannot live in harmony. They will flee, and as they flee, they go into territories that are not known to them and bring a little difficulty in their lives. So I think that the international community, through this compact, will help the countries that are hosting, but also the countries that host the refugees require to change their laws, require to include the refugees in their national plans. As you will all know, that their solutions are three. One, of course, is a resettlement for these refugees to a third country. The second one is return of those populations that wish to voluntarily go back to the countries of origin, which means we must work on the conditions inside for the return to be viable and sustainable. The third one is integration. It has become a challenge for refugees to get integration in this part of, in the Horn of Africa, but we are asking for inclusion. In fact, not even integration. We are asking for inclusion of refugee rights, refugee expectations in national plans, in education, in health.
Funny thing, I wanted to talk about education, and you just brought it up right now. The transition levels are wanting, if I may say so. The transition from perhaps high school to other levels of education. What do you plan to do about this?
I want to say that that's the time bomb. That young people in Kenya refugee camps, South Sudanese, Somalis, particularly, because that's and not only in Kenya, but in the region. The countries that are hosting them must define laws on how to deal with this huge population of young refugees who are transiting from high school. The initial design only included primary education and secondary education. Now we are dealing with a situation where we have a large number of refugees. Particularly, I was amazed by what I saw in Dadaab yesterday. I was in the refugee camp yesterday in Dadaab, and I saw large number of Somali youth who finished high school but cannot transit. That creates frustration, it creates hopelessness, and even dangerously, it's a security danger for the sub-region to allow such a large number of people to sit idle, because then you have got criminal gangs attracting them, or they involve themselves in vices like drug or prostitution. So this needs to be capped fairly urgently, and I think it is a crisis. It requires urgent attention. And we as UNHCR are willing to partner with the host countries with a view to finding solutions for this generation of young people who are coming up in the camps, but who require hope to train, to develop skill. Because as you know, this is the future of a whole country, be it South Sudan or Somalia. The future of the youth is in these camps. If we don't develop them, there's no hope for the future of that country. So I think there needs to be a conversation around how to help these young people to find education, to find skills, so they can help themselves in the countries that host them, but also when they return back to Somalia or South Sudan or Eritrea or Ethiopia, they can be population that's going back with the skills and contribute to the country's development. So there, I think we need to find solutions. We are ready as UNHCR, but the greatest support we require is the host countries, whether how to be able to address this challenge, because we need to have a common position on how to address this challenge.
Okay, well, that's very good. And now, the peace pact between Eritrea and Ethiopia, that's a good thing for the whole of Horn of Africa as well as the neighboring East African region. In your capacity, what will you do to actually make sure that this peace is lasting in terms of refugees resettlement, in terms of the host countries actually putting in place measures to make sure that refugees are well taken care of? Because the peace, it's something good, and it has come with a good tiding, especially with the Prime Minister from Ethiopia and as well as the leader from Eritrea. How do we make sure that refugees are well catered for, especially with the new dawn of peace?
First of all, I think that we need to congratulate these leaders. 20 years of war, the resolve to stop it is not a mean matter. No. So I think congratulations to these leaders for finally seeing the light to decide that it's time to stop the war and allow communities to grow and the countries to thrive. Now, we have a responsibility as international community and as UNHCR to accompany the progress of the peace process. The leaders of these countries have a responsibility to maintain the momentum, because this is the decision to stop the war, and we really welcome and acknowledge. But we as international community have a responsibility to accompany the process. We need to find support on how to implement the elements of that process, particularly how to create better conditions in the country of origin. For instance, in Eritrea, I think that the Eritrean people have unfairly suffered the last 20 years. We as international community need to change the conversation now and see how we can help those ones inside cope with the challenges that they are confronted daily, but also how to help those who are returning. Because as I've met quite a number of Eritreans and Ethiopians, they love their country, they would like to go back. But they would like to go back in a situation where it's possible to thrive and function. We need to resource mobilize as international community. UNHCR will lead those efforts, and will be part of those global efforts to resource mobilize for the Eritrean, Ethiopian, and particularly the people of Eritrea to thrive and to grow as we all wish them to do, and to allow the returns into Eritrea in a dignified manner, in a manner that the Eritrean population, as they return, they feel comfort. As it is now, there are substantial challenges, with the economic situation, with the sanctions on Eritrea, which I hope that the international community will review and lift, so that then the Eritrean population can have an opportunity to thrive. Secondly, the peace process did not only affect Eritrea, Ethiopia, it also affected Eritrea, Djibouti, which is an important angle. It affected Eritrea, Somalia. So you see, these countries have decided courageously to deal with the past and say that we need to open a new chapter. I think that the international community and it behoves of all of us to accompany this process and to make it succeed.
Okay.
Because they have shown us the commitment, and we need to help them to succeed in this commitment.
As we conclude, now the peace deal in South Sudan is it's a good thing for the Horn of Africa region. And the latest report actually showed that 400,000 people have been killed in the ongoing war. Now, as the Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa region, South Sudan actually contributes to a very high percentage of refugees that flow into various camps, not just in Kenya, the Kakuma camp, but other refugee holding areas. What can we do, especially with host government, to ensure that this is not something that will cause an influx in refugees?
First of all, I think the issue of the South Sudan is a painful issue. And for Africa, I think it's a shame that the youngest nation in Africa, immediately after celebrating independence, can go to war with itself. As we speak, UNHCR figures show that daily we receive refugees from South Sudan in Uganda, in Ethiopia, in Kenya. This is and not even as far as Congo. And this must stop. So I think the biggest challenge lies with the political leaders in South Sudan to feel the pain of their people and stop the war. And even as they have now penned the agreement, they have signed an agreement, they must make that agreement work. Because if the agreement does not work, South Sudan will be empty of its population. Now, it's not the intention of all of us to empty South Sudan of its people. So I think, first of all, the biggest responsibility lies with the leadership of South Sudan. Secondly, I think that the region has shown considerable comfort to South Sudan. The South Sudanese have been welcomed into Kenya, they have been welcomed into Uganda, they have been welcomed into Ethiopia and beyond. And we want to thank those countries for the generosity, really, and say thank you for what you have done. But that also calls to action, international engagement with these countries, so that these countries, as they maintain the asylum space, as they encourage the thriving of the refugees here, I mean, trying to give them the support required, we need to accompany this with practical support from the international community. And I hope that, and I use this plea to the donors, to the partners of this region, not to forget the population of South Sudanese in this region, along with the host countries. The host countries have provided the space. I think that we need to play our role too. So far, we want to thank those countries and partners who have come to support the operations of UNHCR in these countries. But as you'll know, a lot needs to be done. Okay. And we do not want the South Sudanese to suffer the case of Somalia refugee situation, where there was donor fatigue and considerable absence of support, because the Somalis, after 27 years, were kind of forgotten that they were refugees in exile who required support. And part of my role is to continue to advocate more support for them in the countries of exile. So South Sudan is a painful story. We want to thank the countries who host them, but I think the biggest challenge and role lies with the two gentlemen you see on the screen here, who have penned an agreement to save South Sudan, and I think they need to follow it up with the practical steps.
Okay, thank you so much. That is the UNHCR Special Envoy for the whole Horn of Africa region. Previously, he was only in charge of Somalia. Once again, congratulations, and I'm sure you will fit in that role perfectly.
Thank you very much for having me.
Ambassador Mohamed Afi, right there. Let's move over to another developing story emanating from Tanzania. There is conflicting information regarding the kidnapping of arguably Africa's youngest billionaire in Tanzania earlier today. Now, Mohamed Dewji, popularly known as Mo, was reported missing after an alleged kidnapping by unknown gunmen. Now, the former politician was abducted while living the luxurious Coliseum Hotel in Dar es Salaam after an early morning gym session. Tanzanian authorities confirmed the missing of Africa's youngest billionaire and say they have launched investigations. Mohamed is the first Tanzanian to feature on Forbes magazine's cover and is the 17th richest person in Africa. Well, we'll definitely keep you updated even as the contradicting information continues to flow. Well, we now take a short break right here on Bottomline Africa. Much more coming after this short break. Do stay with us.